What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to a new episode of Noise Pollution, the only rock and roll therapy session available live every Monday right here on Twitch. I'm Josh, and I think I'm almost as excited for today's guest as a lot of you guys are. We have Andy from Black Veil Brides here, and I don't think he really needs too much of an introduction. I think pretty much everyone knows who he is at this point, but I'm going to do it anyway. He's here to talk about the brand new upcoming album, The Phantom Tomorrow. It's out soon, so you'll be able to listen to it sooner than you know. And we're going to chat about that, whatever else comes up, and a whole bunch of other good stuff. As always, we'll be taking your questions for pretty much the whole second half of the show, so make sure to drop those in the chat and leave them as many as you want, as often as you want. But if you're new to the show and don't know how to do it, your best way of getting them read on screen is to tag my producer, Matt, whose username on Twitch is Permanent Magikarp, and make sure that he sees it and he'll send it to me. He's a bit of a slow old man these days, so make sure to keep an eye out for him there, and tag him, thank him, be nice to him, all of that kind of good stuff. So with that out of the way, let's jump right into it. Andy, how's it going?
Good. I'm well. Thank you for the introduction. I'm very hyped about this guest that you have. That is me. I feel like I'm very excited. Hopefully, I live up to the hype.
You know, I feel like based on the reaction from like the single tweet that's been put out, it seems to have drummed up some interest. So I think people are.
Well, I do have a rule where I don't ask. I want every media outlet to only tweet about me one time, and then we gauge the level of interest from that. That's the standing rule.
Yeah, I mean that makes sense. You know, if people have to tweet about you more than once, then is it even really worth doing?
It's a litmus test for Well, that's how I see. No, honestly, I'm excited to do this. Obviously, Lilith did this very recently, so I got to see that broadcast. But now to be on the other side is it's my moment. I do have a question for you real quick.
Sure, of course.
Is there any chance that those are empty guitar cases and it's just an affectation, or is it legit guitar cases?
I wish.
Because I would love the pretend idea that it's just a bunch of empty guitar cases as like a display.
That would be way cheaper than what's actually inside of them. Unfortunately, they're all full. But if I thought about it in advance, I probably could have gotten some empty guitar cases just to make it look cool.
Just a wall of guitar cases.
Yeah, that's maybe that'll be. I'm moving into like a real setup pretty soon, so maybe that's what I'll do is just a whole row of empty guitar cases. Nothing.
I'm a little guilty though, because I this is a true fact of our home, is that in our living room area, by like where like kind of there's like an area where you keep stuff you don't know what to do with, kind of near a closet. We have 5 empty guitar cases that we don't know where to put them. So I see them every day, and so I'm always curious, does anyone else have a bunch of empty guitar cases in their home?
I mean, I'm sure other people do. Technically, mine sit empty. At my old place, we had a wall hanger for them. And so the guitars were all hung up on the wall, and then the cases were all just like thrown in a closet and like under the bed and stuff. But I didn't have them on display there.
We had reached maximum capacity for actual guitars in cases with places where they needed to go, and so now there's just a cool stack of guitar cases. Anyway, this is not. I've now hijacked the interview. I'm sure you have plans.
I mean, that's a valuable question. People want to know that, I think.
But you're the host of the show, man. People see that background. They want to know about what's going down.
I know. Anyway, let's get to why we're actually here and talk about The Phantom Tomorrow, which is coming soon. I mean, what should people kind of expect from that? And, I know you put a lot of time and effort into it. What's this album about, for lack of a better term?
Well, so we started recording this record in January of 2020, prior to the shared nightmare of the pandemic that we've all been experiencing. And for the most part, I would say in the early days, I had started with just this kind of comic book concept and these characters. And for the most part, in the early days, it was more just about this idea of cultural identity and how, they're this sort of like who you are and how you portray yourself in these kind of avatar-based characters that we have on the internet, and how so much of your personality is decided by other people based on 140 characters or these other things. And just kind of, if I could build a kind of a parallel world where there wasn't social media, but those same level of like surface level ideas and concepts were what people decided how they felt about you based on, And then as the year unfolded and seeing the kind of, obviously it's incredibly divisive, but also just seeing how we culturally have become so adept at giving other people our power and these kind of political avatars and, the sides and the team sports ideas and so much of our personalities culturally have become about what team we play for versus any kind of personal ideas or growth. I started to get really interested in the idea of building out a world that is just entirely predicated on that. And if the idea of hero worship, which has become so prevalent in our society to a level where we put all of our hopes and dreams into these kind of icons of righteousness, whether it's for one side or the other. And if those heroes inherently are flawed and do not care about us in the way that we want them to, if you had characters and heroes who were more overt in the way that they showed you that they didn't care, and how would you find a way to save yourself, and how would you get out of the rut of being so obsessed with the idea that someone else is the reason or someone else is the avatar for ideas or hopes or dreams. So that was kind of the basis, and then building the world out from there. So the record it's a rock opera, it's a concept record. It goes from the idea at the top of the record that we've got our hero, we've got our star, and then through the course of the record, we as the audience and the members in the story start to kind of tear that hero apart until eventually we're left with nothing but the choice to either become the hero that we want to see, so to speak, or give up on the idea of hero worship entirely.
Absolutely. And obviously, you guys are no strangers to big theatric, dramatic rock and roll. What's that like to really be able to come up with an idea like this that, as you said, is really a concept album, it's a big rock opera, but at the same time, it's so kind of grounded in reality and kind of has, those notions that tie back into the real world and, kind of be able to say, hey, this is something we really want to do. Let's go put this on an album.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's always a delicate balance that you have to strike when it comes to doing a concept record, because you don't want the songs and ideas to be entirely about, a theoretical universe or a theoretical emotion. The best songs, I think, in terms of hard rock are the ones that resonate on a personal level and are being written from the perspective that the writer or the writers of the song have experienced this emotion or are feeling it, and it's not a pandering thing. It's one of the reasons why, for me, I've never been able to relate to like fantasy metal or the kind of like, goblins and dragons and that kind of stuff, because to me, it's never worked on the level of I'm driving in my car and I'm listening to this and this represents me, or I feel this emotion, or this as you said, resonates to me in some way. So it's one of those things where all the pieces of this story are things that we're experiencing in real time. We were writing this story during the COVID-19 pandemic, during the election, during all of these major things culturally. And so as those things are happening, they reflect in many ways on the experience that you have in real life, and you can kind of find ways to craft and tell those stories through the course of the album itself.
Absolutely. And I know people are ecstatic and super excited for this album. And I think, one of the ways that is kind of most obvious is that Scarlet Cross is the highest charting song you've had since like 2012 or something like that.
Yeah.
I mean, what's that like to put out this new track, and obviously put out this track in the middle of the pandemic, and have that kind of reception to it where, people are all about it. And now, with the first two singles out now, people seem to really be into this and really be anticipating it.
Yeah, I mean, look, it is, I've said it before, to be 11 years into the band's career and to have what is now our highest charting song at Active Rock Radio, it is now done better than In the End did, which was the biggest song in our career and is our first gold record. And I don't mean to sound braggadocious, it's just pretty significant to us. Yeah, I mean, it is. It is not lost on us how incredible that is, and how for a band that's never really had any mainstream success to be given this opportunity this many years into our career and to make a record that, during this crazy time in the world and all these other things, to have it already, 2 songs out from the record, and it's already impacting our fans in such a way, and it's already making such crazy moments and things happen for us. It's an incredible honor, and I think it's one that, again, as a band, we certainly don't take lightly, and the impact of it is not lost on us. We are tremendously appreciative that to be this far into your career and to have a moment like this It doesn't come often, and we're so thankful and we're appreciative, and we honestly we just can't wait for the record to come out so that people can hear the whole thing.
Absolutely. And kind of speaking of that 11-year mark in the career, and the length of your career, we're coming up on a decade of Set the World on Fire, which I feel like is really kind of the album that that I think of, at least when I think Black Veil Brides. What's that like to look back on it? I know last year, you celebrated the anniversary of Stitch These Wounds, and it's like,
Yeah.
what's that like to have these albums kind of come back around the second time?
I'm getting an Amber Alert. So oh, okay. I got a notification that you can now receive a vaccine without an appointment in LA County. So there you go. Thank you, Amber Alert. In any event, sorry, that's always disconcerting when that goes off on your phone. Sorry. Anyway, yeah. Set the World on Fire was kind of our first bite at the apple, so to speak, when it came to like a larger budget and a plan in place for us, and there were people who seemed behind the scenes to really care and want the band to succeed at a different level. And it also came with expectations that were larger than before, because when We Stitch These Wounds came out, there was zero expectations. In fact, if there was an expectation, it was that we were going to fail. And in many cases, it was the first time that we were showing that, because of the fans and propping us up and putting us in the situation, that we had some viability. And so we were getting bigger tour offers. We were finding our way into kind of more, I guess, I don't know what to call it, relevancy or whatever you want to say. But as a record, it's one that I know it did a lot for our career, and it's one that meant a lot, and I know the fans love it a lot. For me, it's not one that I feel as close of a connection with on a lyrical end.
Right.
I think in many ways, with the next record, Wretched and Divine, is when I feel like, as a songwriter myself, I kind of found my tonality, and I found kind of where my voice comes from, so to speak. There's certainly moments on Set the World on Fire where I feel like songs like Savior and, probably to some degree songs like Ritual, and then of course Legacy and other songs. But when it comes to as a body of work, it was an extremely fun time in my life. I was 19 years old and just so excited about the possibility of rock stardom and all the things that came with it, and the getting to do what I've always wanted to do and go on the road and dress up in crazy costumes. And just from that level, it was tremendous, and one of my happiest times in the early part of my career especially. But for me personally, I would say of all the albums, on a song-for-song basis, I would say it resonates with me a little bit less lyrically than some of the others, but as a body of work, we're tremendously proud of it. And obviously it's done so much for us, and there's so many people that was their entry point into the band. And to this day, there's a certain type of fan that really loves that kind of glam metal era of the band, probably more than anything else. I know I have friends who that's their favorite era of the band. So far be it for me to tell somebody else what is good or bad about anything. But I know on a personal level, it's one that doesn't as heavily resonate with me from a lyrical perspective.
Absolutely, and I mean that's totally understandable. I would be concerned if something that you wrote 10 years ago or 11 years ago still, was still your favorite.
But there's certainly there is truth in that. There's also, and I think that I maybe didn't understand this as much when I was a younger kid, but you'd sometimes hear artists who are singer-songwriters talk about a demo that they never released that is one of their favorite songs, and you'd go, well, why wasn't it released, or what is it about it? And then as you grow and as you become the writer that maybe you were meant to be, not to sound too pretentious or whatever, but the kind of direction that you were meant to go in, I think you can look at yourself and go, wow, I got that right, or that was a moment where I was kind of getting close to where I wanted to be as a writer.
Absolutely. And, how have you seen the band change over the last decade? I mean, you've been playing with mostly the same guys for, your entire adult life at this point. What's that been like, and how have those relationships changed, and musically, how have you guys changed together?
I think being in a band is, I've said it before, is kind of an interesting premise, right? Like, because the basis for joining a band or being in a band with somebody is like, oh, you like Black Sabbath, I like Black Sabbath too. Let's play a song together. You know what I mean? That is the entry point for being in a band together, is like a shared interest in music, or you play an instrument I don't play, or you have a skill set that I don't have, and our powers combined will be able to rock, that kind of thing. What you don't have is any kind of measuring stick for someone's personality, or what living with somebody is going to be like, or what spending a decade essentially every day together in different countries, exhausted, hungover, whatever it is, all these different emotions and feelings that you go through, spending every minute next to somebody. And the other funny thing about a band is, like, there's nothing really to talk about, and people don't really understand that. When you're on tour, like, everything that happened to you happened to me. So what, you know what I mean? Like, we don't have, what did you do yesterday? Well, I know, because I was right next to you the whole time. So you go for these long extended periods where you're in kind of the early stage of your development. For me as a young adult, figuring out who I was, and every experience I have are these shared crazy experiences with these other people, and it would be essentially impossible to not grow a sense of familial brotherhood, and especially with a band like ours that's been so divisive and so derided by different people over the years. It was very much an us against the world mentality, and we had this band of brothers against everybody else kind of thing. The distinction is that over time, that surface level stuff and those shared experiences and those other things sometimes can't overcome differences in personality or lifestyle choices or whatever it is. And that's when a lot of times bands ultimately fall by the wayside, because that surface level connection of this is us against the world can't always supersede the difficulties you might face with somebody's differences or whatever it is when it comes to, like, oh, I need to sleep at this time and this person's up all night, or I like to eat this thing and this person has this, or little tiny things that come with living with somebody, because ultimately being in a band is very much like being in a long-term relationship. So what I've always found us very lucky in the sense that we have so much, we have experienced so much, and we've gone through so many things, and we've had bad times, we've had good times, and now here we are 11 years in, and our relationship as a band is stronger than it's ever been, and it's gone beyond the surface level, we've done this together and so we share this experience, and it has really become legitimately like family. And our relationships are built upon years of a life together and years of enjoyment of the art that we've created, and a life that is, it's everything to each other.
Absolutely. And kind of speaking of that life that you guys have built together, the last time we spoke, and then the last time you were on the Twitch stream actually, was for Restitch These Wounds, which, is obviously something that not every band gets the opportunity to go back and kind of redo an old album. What was that like, and what's kind of the impact that you've seen it have on both yourselves as musicians, but on also people who maybe weren't fans of the album the first time around, but got to hear this new version, or, kind of discovered new things through it?
Well, again, it kind of goes back to the personal relationship within the band. We had gone through a difficult time. By the time we did the record Veil, we kind of didn't even know if the band was going to continue on. And through the course of the end of the summer of 2019 through the summer of 2020, when the record was released, we had really gone through like an emotional renaissance, and our connectivity and our ability to work together as artists had grown so much that the idea of revisiting that first record and doing it now in this better place in our lives, in a better headspace with more experience, it was, it really was cathartic in so many ways. Like, it really was the kind of experience where you felt like, you were exercising the demons, so to speak, and to do it and have it sound the way we've always wanted to, because this actually goes back to, like, I think it was 2013. I mean, the record came out in 2010, but by 2013 we were already kind of lobbying our old label, saying, hey, could we try to do that record again? Like, we feel like we've learned a lot and we can make it sound, because the reality is, I think the budget on We Stitch These Wounds was like $6,000. We recorded it in a very small studio in LA, and by the way, $6,000 in LA doesn't really get you a whole lot.
Right.
So it was a situation where we were recording at the night shift when the studio was available. I tracked all the vocals in a closet, like a broom closet in the studio. Like, it was as low budget as possible, and we had gotten to the point by 2013, 2014 that we kind of knew how to make records in a better way. And also Jake had grown so much as a budding producer and songwriter, so he felt like he could take the reins. So we were trying all the way back then, and ultimately it didn't work out. And so when the opportunity came of, like, all right, it's 10 years later, we're in this new place in our lives, we're a better band than we were then, let's do it. Let's take a stab and do it. And, thankfully we had gotten out of our previous record deal, and we were free agents, and we entered into the deal with Sumerian Records with, like, this is what we want to do first. And they were very receptive to it. The irony, of course, is that Ash Alvinson, who owns and operates and is the CEO of Sumerian Records, wanted to sign Black Veil back in 2010. He was one of the only champions of the band that existed. I mean, he was from the very beginning somebody who was, he was like, I can't sign you, but I'll be your booking agent. Whatever it is, he always believed in me and believed in the band. And so it was kind of a nice full circle thing where he was finally putting out that record the way that it maybe should have been put out 10 years ago. But yeah, it was an incredible experience, and I think that it's not meant to replace We Stitch These Wounds. It's just meant to be a companion piece, and if you want to hear kind of what 11 years of experience will do for a band and recording the same material, I think it's a nice little time capsule.
Absolutely. And in addition to seeing the band grow over the last 10, 11 years, what's it been like to see some of these fans who, I'm sure were very angry 14-year-olds when they first discovered your music, and now they're full-grown adults with marriage and kids and everything else. What's it like to see kind of that evolution of your fan base, where it's not just angry teenagers showing up to the show anymore, but now you have the new teenagers who've discovered you recently, as well as those original fans who are now working professionals?
Yeah, I mean, I think much is made by a lot of artists about wanting a different audience than what they have and feeling embarrassed that such and such person listens to their music. And I think one of the things that's always separated us is that, I was a teenager when the band started. I was the audience that was listening to us. I was the same person in many ways. And so for us, there's never been, and also there's an inherent sexism that comes from it as well. There is always the metal community primarily would talk about how, that band's only listened to by teenage girls and therefore they're irrelevant. And the thing that is not pointed out there is that what is being said is that young girls couldn't be capable of figuring out what's good or bad. And that is inherently offensive and untrue.
Right,
so
that's ridiculous.
What we've seen is, there's certainly been a growth in the audience. I think at this point, our audience ranges from teenagers who are just discovering the band to, in some cases, people in their 50s who are big hard rock fans and like the pageantry and the show and the kind of old school rock elements of the band. But all of those people are valid in their enjoyment, and I think that bands get hung up sometimes by wanting a different type of fan. And you see it all the time with bands who they make an attempt to make records that are for an audience that they don't have, and to try to bring in an audience. And sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. For us, it's always been about feeling lucky that we've had even one person like our music, let alone trying to figure out what demographic they fit into. But it is valid, and what you're saying is that, somebody who was 14 years old when We Stitch These Wounds came out is now a 24-year-old adult who has a very different life. And it is cool. If nothing else, it makes me feel like the oldest person in the world when I was literally at the car wash today, driving back from the studio, and someone who was a grown-up, fully grown up, came up to me, and they were very excited to see me or whatever, and they had, I listened to you when I was a kid and blah, blah, blah. And it just, anytime that happens, I'm obviously very appreciative, but it's always funny because it's like, well, now, this person appeared to be about 30 years old, and it was just funny to me because I'm the same age, but I've been in these people's consciousness since I was 16 or 17 years old. So, that is, it makes for sometimes people can't believe that I'm only 30 because they're pretty sure I must, because I've been around in their minds for so long. But yeah, again, long story, even longer, I've sort of rambled here as I always do, but we're just appreciative that we've been able to evolve and grow. But if the only people that ever listened to us were in a certain demographic, that's inconsequential to me, because those people it's resonating with what we do is resonating with them, and I just want to make music that relates to people, and I'm not consciously ever thinking about who those people might be.
Absolutely. And I'll ask you one more question before we get to some of the questions from Twitch, because I know we already have a ton of them. But, something very important for you, I know, is the Cincinnati Bengals. Did you watch any of the draft? I mean, what do you think of their choices and their chance this year? I mean, Burrow got his wide receiver. There you go.
Look, much is made about the offensive line. I host on terrestrial radio in Cincinnati. I host the WBN pregame show, so I have to be consciously watching things like that, not just from the fan perspective, but for how, as the season starts, I can kind of talk about these things for the pregame shows. And so, I try to do as much research into the analytics as possible. And from an analytic perspective, there was, I think, one of the things about the Bengals in general is it's a small market team. national media does not know about the team or really understand the dynamics of how the team works. There was immediately a narrative that I believe Berger McFarland on ESPN said it would be malpractice to draft anyone but a left tackle, ignoring the fact that we had drafted a left tackle in the first round 2 years ago who was injured last year,
Right.
and many others. So through the offseason, the Bengals signed Riley Reif. They've shored up the offensive line. They've cut players who were not doing well. In the game where Joe Burrow got injured, the two players who were on the line that were most responsible for the injury in terms of where they were in relationship to him are both no longer on the team. The injuries have been a huge problem last year. And of course, they ended up drafting 3 offensive linemen in this draft, all of whom they believe have some level of being able to start, including the second round pick. So I was happy with the pick of Jamar Chase, because I think for a small market team, you can't really pass up elite talent like that. And a kid that has that high of an upside, it's just it's a big thing. I think the fans are really excited. I'm really excited, and that's my little football spiel.
Absolutely, and I mean it's got to feel good for Burrow getting a wide receiver that he already knows and likes.
We also drafted several other LSU players. It does seem, and we also got Thaddeus Moss, who's Randy Moss's son, who was also on LSU. We basically have the 2019 LSU Tigers in Cincinnati.
I mean, there's worse teams you could pick from.
No, they were historically good. Hopefully we can be historically good. I'd take just decent at this point.
There you go. I think that'd be an improvement. So now we'll go to some of the questions from Twitch. Now that we got the important football discussion out of the way.
It's always important. I do a podcast every week, and we try our hardest to not belabor the football point, because I know so few of the audience are Bengals fans, but I like to think that I've converted some people over the years.
I think there's definitely some crossover between Black Veil and between Bengals fans. There's got to be an overlap there somewhere.
I have for years said that the Bengals are Black Veil Brides and vice versa, in that
there you go.
If you write something good about the Bengals, if ESPN posts something good about the Bengals, 90% of the comments underneath it will be about how terrible they are and a crappy franchise and stupid and irrelevant. Just like if a metal website posts a Black Veil Brides article, 90% of the comments will be about how they can't believe that they have to see this band in front of them. I could go on forever, but my friend Ryan Downey, I put together like a long text one day about all the reasons why I believe that Black Veil Brides and the Bengals are the same.
I like it. I think everyone should be able to compare their band to their favorite football team. That would make music as a whole a lot better.
Well, it just goes to show my incredible level of ego that I can't enjoy anything without making it about me.
There you go. I appreciate that. So the first question from Twitch comes from Latin Fire, who wants to know, what is your favorite symbol or Easter egg from both Scarlet Cross and Field of Bones?
Let's see. I've got all the little costumes and pieces and stuff around here. There's one that I don't think anybody caught, which is that there's like 4 or 5 different number 9s on the character 9's mask in the Fields of Bone video that I put in there with when I was painting the mask, because I made the mask literally sitting in this chair. But I put a bunch of different number 9s in there that I was curious if anybody had seen. I don't think anybody's caught it, so that's one. And then I would say what are some other, there are slight changes to the Blackbird's costume and look from video 1 to video 2. His bandages are dirtier and darker. The idea is that some time has passed since he got into this tunnel. So, there's little continuity things that I like that I know probably nobody else notices, but I'm a nerd for it.
Hey, somebody's got to appreciate it. And
it's just for me.
The next question is, what's something you wished you'd tried sooner?
Roller coasters.
There you go.
When I was a kid, I was assumed that you would just die if you went on a roller coaster. It seemed like so impractical and crazy. I was like, why is this? Why would you get on this? And then it was in 2011, I went to Universal Studios with my friend Jeremiah, who's the guitar player in the band Demon Hunter, and a guy who was working for us at the time. We went there, and my friend Jesse, and those guys are very we love roller coasters, and I did not want to seem like the nerd who didn't also love roller coasters, so I pretended like I also loved roller coasters, and so I had to go to this thing having never been on an adult-sized roller coaster, and get onto the Hulk, which is the first ride we did, which I don't, if you've ever been to Universal Studios, is one where you start off really slow and then it shoots you like 900 miles an hour into the sky.
Yep.
That was my first ever roller coaster experience as an adult. And I loved it. And then we did rides the whole day, and I was thrilled by it the whole time. And I've been trying to catch up ever since. Unfortunately, the pandemic has shut down all the opportunities for amusement parks. Usually, I'll get to like go to Six Flags or something when I'm on tour. But yeah, that's one that I waited too long in life for. And by the way, I still think it's impractical and dangerous.
I mean, that makes sense. And I always feel like the first roller coaster that you go on any given day, even if you've been on 100 before, the first one you're still like, should I really be doing this? Is this a good idea? And then after that, it's fine.
Yeah, and you keep going. Well, I had no choice because I had pretended that I loved it, so I couldn't back down. But I will say that's not entirely true. There, in 2008 or so, I did go on the Batman roller coaster at Six Flags, but I was so terrified of because someone had just told me the story, a very terrible story of at the Atlanta Six Flags on the Batman ride, someone was decapitated on the ride. And I had just heard this story. So I got on it certain that something bad was going to happen. And there's actually, I think on the internet, you can find video. I don't know how there's video, but I've seen before like a GIF of me like riding on it and just terrified. So I didn't enjoy the experience.
Got it. Well, I'm glad that now you can.
Yeah.
And the next question comes from Aesthetic Bay, who wants to know: are there any orchestral pieces on the new album?
Yes. Several. That's all I'm going to say.
That's all good. I think that is plenty of information on that one.
It's the shortest answer I'll give all day.
And clearly a fan, BBB Army Loser, wants to know who's your favorite. I cannot talk today. Who's your favorite Disney villain, and which villain do you relate the most to?
My favorite Disney villain is Scar from The Lion King. And I don't know that I relate to any of them in particular, because their whole goal is to ruin the goodness and positivity of the world. I mean, like, Disney villains it's like a cliche. Like, their whole goal is to be the worst. So I don't know that I relate to any of them on a personal level. I might be concerned if I started to feel like I'm a little bit like one of these characters. But perhaps, because I always thought he was entertaining, Hades from Hercules, yeah. But I don't relate to James Woods at all, who plays Hades. So, it can't all work.
There you go. I always, depending on your definition of Disney villain, I always feel like Gaston is really kind of lumped in there and just not as bad as most of the rest of them.
Yeah, he really isn't. I mean, look, that's a tricky story anyway. The whole of Beauty and the Beast is a little bizarre when you break down like what's actually happening there.
True.
However, I do want. Was I incorrect? It's James Woods plays the Hades, right? Am I wrong about this?
I think so.
I now have to look this up.
I was going to say I'm not a Disney expert like that, so
here we go. Yeah, James Woods. So again, I'd like to specify, I do not relate to James Woods. I do relate to Hades.
I think that's understandable.
I'm going to get a T-shirt that says that.
And the next question comes from Grimoire Girl, who wants to know: are there any outfits that you've worn on stage that you now consider were a terrible idea?
Well, I can tell you just from a practical perspective, the jacket that I designed for myself for the Wretched and Divine era doesn't work. So it has one sleeve that becomes a glove, and then no sleeve on the other side. So when you put it on, the sleeve that has the glove in it, there's no counterbalance, so it just pulls the entire jacket to one side of your body. So at all times, it's just up around my neck, and like it was entirely impractical. That's why I never wore it on stage. It's only in music videos and photo shoots. I never wore it once on stage because it doesn't work. We'd have to pin it in the back to my pants to try to keep it in place. So that one, I loved the way it looked aesthetically, but it did not. It worked better in my drawings than it did in real life.
Sometimes it's just like that. And Nicole Lee wants to know, what's your craziest tour memory?
I've talked about it a lot before, but you'd be hard pressed to say anything was crazier than when we were in Tokyo for the 8.9 earthquake and tsunami. That was the craziest moment of my adult life, and certainly the moment where I felt the closest to considering my own mortality on a real level. Being outside of the venue when it all struck, we were inside when it hit, and then running outside and seeing. I've told before there was two buildings that were, medium-sized downtown-style office buildings. It's not skyscrapers, but large buildings that were about as far away from me as, like, the length or the depth of, like, a regular city street. And they kinked and then snapped into each other and then hit each other at the top and then came back, and all the windows came boop, 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 rushing down like broken. And that was that far away from me, and I just considered to myself, like, this is like the end of, you know what I mean? Like, there's no, I mean, not even being funny, like, there's nothing else that you can consider at a time like that. So that was terrifying and crazy. And I think probably, I'm not trying to brag about being part of an awful, awful tragedy, but it certainly supersedes any other crazy tour story that you can think of.
Yeah, I don't know how many bands have experienced anything like that, and
it was us and Murder Dolls and All That Remains, and we were all stuck in a hotel, and just, for a week, all of our tours were canceled, and we were stuck there, and we weren't on tour with All That Remains at the time, but we knew them just from playing a bunch of festivals and stuff together. They were the same, that just happened to be at the same hotel as us, and so it was just, we were stuck there, and it was very crazy. It was, I've always said the night after, it was like being an I Am Legend or something, because you'd walk through Tokyo in the city where there's all these lights, and it's like, and there's no humans out, just nobody. All the lights are on and all of the buildings are flashing, but there's nobody on the streets. It was very bizarre and terrifying, and it is an event that moved the Earth's axis and it moved Japan's 8 feet closer to the west coast of the United States, which is pretty significant in terms of, like, it doesn't sound like a lot, but that is a shit ton of movement for an entire island country.
Absolutely, that's insane. And the next question comes from Super Dead Rose, who wants to know, what's one thing you would want to tell your younger self?
There was a store in Cincinnati where I grew up on the west side called Devereaux's that had, like, sports hats and things, and I used to go there with my dad all the time, so that name made me think of Devereaux's. And the commercials for the store were, everybody knows where to get their clothes, Devereaux's. And I've had that, there's those things that get into your head when you're a kid and then they just pop up randomly. Everybody knows where to get their clothes, Devereaux's comes into my head at least, like, once a month for the last, 25 years. What's something I would tell my younger self? Is that the question?
Yeah. What's something, or, like a piece of advice or something that you would tell your younger self?
Confront the things that scare you and the anxieties that you have, and don't just try to drink them away or run away from the way you feel. I think, just don't be as hard on yourself. I think a lot of young people experience that, and as you get older, you're able to have a little bit more perspective on it. But when I was very young, all the things that I've struggled with in my life, whether it's anxiety or obsessive tendencies or whatever you want to say, the myriad of things that I and many other people deal with, from a mental health perspective, to be able to not be so hard on myself, and to take time to take care of myself and treat myself well, instead of just trying to drink and get past the problems and the fears and anxieties that I have. I think even if I told myself that now when I was 20, 21 years old, I don't know that I'd listen. I think you have to get to that point and experience things. But that's the advice I try to give younger fans, is just to remember to not beat yourself up about who you are, and try to find a way to confront the things that you're upset about and be comfortable and happy in the person that you are.
I think that's great advice for everyone. And we will take one more question from Twitch before switching briefly to the Instagram and Twitter questions from earlier, since I don't want to leave them hanging, since they were the first ones in. And that question is actually something that we've had asked a few times now, which is, are there other plans for more acoustic shows? Since I know that's something that you guys have done a little bit of recently, and people seem to really be into.
Yeah, we said we were done, and our idea was to do the Unplugged as the last one of the year, and that still remains kind of the case. But I would be lying if I didn't say that the great reception to that, coupled with just how much we enjoyed it, I would say that there's a chance that we do more, of those shorter kind of radio sets that we've done. Maybe not another full-length, like Storytellers Unplugged type stream. I think that we've kind of done that, and I feel like it went really well and people enjoyed it. But we may, in the future, do more of those kind of short pop-up show type things online.
Absolutely. So for those of you on Twitch, you can still ask questions. We will get to them in a minute. We're going to switch over to Instagram real fast. And I will ask you the first question that came up, which is, are there any new influences on the new album that haven't been on previous Black Veil albums?
I don't know that there's new influences so much as there's just an evolution in terms of us as writers. You take in different things all the time. When we first started, we were really much more of a combination directly of the things that we were interested in, whether that's, for me, more punk rock bands like Lord of the New Church or Sisters of Mercy or The Damned or The Misfits or Alkaline Trio or those kind of things, then combining that stylistically with Jinx's love of Metallica and Megadeth, and Jake's love of more like intricate metal, and Cece's love of heavy, just generally heavy music, and Cece's always loved electronic stuff. All those different things, they come together in many ways. I would say now, because we're this many years into the band, all those ingredients are kind of distilled into who we are as writers, and so we kind of approach things with our own Rolodex of ideas or ways to enter into a song, because you've got these years of influences that you've kind of pulled from. As far as new influences on the band, just working with the producer, Eric Rahn, has been a huge distinction for us, because he's brought us to places as writers that we hadn't gone and that we wanted to go, but sometimes you don't. This is one of the great things about a producer who really understands the project, is that they will dive in head first and really become a part of the band in a way while you're making the record. And that's certainly been Eric. So Eric bringing a much more modern sensibility to the tonality of the songs, and understanding a little bit more about how maybe we could evolve our sound, has really helped us tremendously, and I think it's made this record one of the most unique ones we've done.
Absolutely. And kind of to touch on that sound that you were talking about, how it's gone from a combination of everything that everyone liked to kind of a more organic, authentic sound for you guys. That's one thing that I've noticed on the last few albums. They really sound, for lack of a better term, harmonious, in which it's not, this is part punk and part metal and part whatever else. It's, this is the sound, and it all kind of works together a lot better. Is that something that you've noticed in the creative process, that, there's less push and pull between people, where you're saying, hey, let's put this forward as a Black Veil Bride sound, or as a Black Veil Bride's album, and, this is something that we can all agree on, so to speak?
Well, we didn't start writing songs as a band from the ground up until Wretched and Divine. That was the first record that we did where we started with nothing and then would write a song. For the first two records, all of the songs were put together as musical compositions first, and in most cases, prior to Jake and Jinx even being in the band. Many of them were songs that Jake had just put together himself musically. Many of them are ones that he and Jake had written together. Some of them are ones that Jake and Jinx and Cece had done in a separate band that they had prior to being in Black Veil. And then I'd come in and add top line to it, or whatever you want to call it. So it was like, in many ways, you didn't really get a cohesive feeling until, you're really building all those elements together at the same time. And I think that's, people notice a directional shift in the band. That would be one of the biggest things, is that for the last second half of our catalog, it's writing a song from scratch together and building those elements. Now, that doesn't always the case. It doesn't mean that people don't come into the studio with an idea. The Scarlet Cross riff and basic structure was created by Jake prior to us getting into the studio, just like the lyric and title and all those things I had prior to that day as well, and then we put them together and made a song that way. But more often than not, we are sitting in a room and starting from nothing, and that really gives you that opportunity to take those distilled influences and inject them into something. Because if you go, well, I'd like an orchestral part here, Jinx can whip it up and come up with something, and you go, oh, well, maybe we do this kind of thing with the guitar, and you can build things up in a way that doesn't feel so Frankenstein, and it feels like you're making a product.
Absolutely. And another question from Instagram: what's your favorite thing about the new album?
it's the first opportunity I've had in my career to really fully realize a concept to where I feel like the whole story exists on the record, and the detail work and the things that we were able to do to make it feel like its own world were much more. I was able to go into it much deeper. So for me personally, just knowing what a complete body of work it is, but also I just think, you know, I'm so incredibly excited about what we've been able to put together as a band. Again, to go back to the timeline, this is a band that is pretty far into our career. To feel like we're still reinventing and coming up with new ideas and concepts and evolving is it's, you know, it's something that we're really proud of. And I think that probably more than anything shines on the record is that, you know, I think some people heard Scarlet Cross and there's the woes and the chorus and that whole thing, and they go, oh, it's the same Black Veil Bride song. And then they heard Fields of Bone and go, whoa, this is totally different. And then by the time they hear the next song, they go, oh, that sounds like Black Veil Bride. And then the next one is, oh, it's totally different. And the idea of being able to be true to the band that we are and also evolve within the context of the same album is something that I think is a difficult thing to do, and I think we've been able to achieve it.
Absolutely. And kind of, as we talked about a little bit earlier, I think one thing that the band has always done well is to kind of evolve and grow without trying to make a specific album for something specific, or without leaving what people know and love of Black Veil Brides.
Yeah, I mean, I think the minute that you get into making a record for anybody else, you're destined to fail. You know, even for your audience. I've always been very clear to the Black Veil Brides fans. I don't sit down to write songs for them. I write songs for the life that I've experienced or the things that I feel, and I hope and really, really want for those things to resonate with the audience so that they can take something out of it for themselves. It actually, to me, it enhances your enjoyment if you know that the person who's singing the song or wrote the lyrics means it and didn't write this to try to impress you or to prey upon the way that they think you are. I think a lot of times people will write songs because they think that their audience is going to like this. And I think the minute that you do that, you're no longer creating legitimate art in any way. You're just trying to make a commercial, because that's what commercials are. They're focus grouped, and they're based on what might help you buy something, and they're not built of someone's own art or volition. So when I listen to Born to Run, the Bruce Springsteen song, and it gets me jacked up when I'm driving in my car, it's not because I think he wrote it about me, because he wrote the song 30 years before I was born, 20 years before I was born, and it had nothing to do with me. But when I'm 16 years old driving in my car trying to get away from this town I grew up in and all that shit, it meant just as much to me, and it meant more to know that it meant something to him because I'm relating to this artist directly, and some part of me lives in his words. And I think that is the thing that, you know, is most important as a writer, is to be able to convey how you feel in a way that is relatable to people, but not to try to pinpoint what you think they might like, because the second you do that, it's offensive to your audience. You're saying, I know more than you know about yourself, and that's just not true.
Absolutely. And the next question is, what are some, I'm not sure if they mean new bands that you like or that you're listening to, or bands that you've just started listening to, but it is, you know, what are some new bands that you're listening to?
My favorite band that is out now is,